Okay, welcome everybody to this episode of Freedom Hub's Working Group. I'm your host, Jeff Cantor, along with Charles Broman. I wanted to make sure you knew we were sponsored by the Freedom Hub, which we are, the Disruptors Intersection. And we're definitely trying to get all these activists and entrepreneurs together for a better world, and we hope you're going to be a part of that. We are recording all of these for posterity, and I will show you where we archive them, but here are the various links. We're on the more popular channels. If you think of any others we need to be on, we'd certainly like to tap into those. And if you could subscribe to these channels, even maybe you like Brighteon as opposed to the other, but you know what, do us a favor, go to all the channels and subscribe, because the more subscribers, the more it drives our traffic and more people get to see these videos. And if you're a guest, we'd like you to help promote your own video that way too. We also have several other shows. We have a cash patient show that we do on 7 p.m. Eastern on Wednesdays. And also on Thursday nights, we feature a show all about getting control of your money, which is another important area to be concerned about. And of course, you're going to want to visit the website. These are 2 domain names that take you to the exact same place. So let's take a look. But before we do, just as a reminder, we do have a LinkedIn page just for this group. So we'd certainly like you to participate. There's a lot of neat stuff going on over here. And as I said, we do archive everything off of our main website. So if you come to the main website, you will notice there's a variety of drop downs and there's a lot of great stuff you're going to want to come and explore. But if you go over home and you'll notice webinars, well, lo and behold, that's where we are today. So we're going to circle back to this in a minute when we introduce today's guest. But here's the list of the events. So here's Wednesdays today and right now and then a little later. And then here's the information pertinent to the Thursday webinar about money. And then most importantly, here at the bottom are the links to all of the websites. So these videos are released over the weekend. So come Monday, this webinar will be on all of these links. So you just come back to this page and click on any one you want, and there you go. And to give you a flavor of what that looks like, here's an example of what we've got up on BitChute. And you can see it goes back quite a bit. And needless to say, or sadly, I should say, that old ones are as pertinent as new ones, because a lot of these issues haven't gone away yet. So we need to stay on top of them. And here we are on Brighteon, and here we are over on Rumble. So there's a lot of neat places to go. Now, as I said, we want to keep things going. So when the conversation ends today, and you're going to learn a lot, and you're going to be excited, and it's not just going to end now. We want you to continue the conversation. So you'll see there'll be the chance to come after the fact and connect with these people that were a part of this and help further their cause, or you can become involved or follow their blog, or any number of ways that you get to participate. And as a simple example, if you were to click on one, you're going to get to all the links of their video, background on them, if they had a presentation, if there's blog links, everything will be up on that individualized page. So you can keep moving forward. And in that same vein, there's a variety of organizations that are fighting for us. And here's a growing list of them right here, as you'll see. But most importantly, here at the top, these are important issues of things that are happening right now, legislative issues. And we're going to hear about stuff today as a prime example. These, sadly, are things you need to all click on. It's like, well, let me pick one that I like out of here. No. You need to click on every one of these and act on all of this information. Every one of these selective group here really needs your help. And then lastly, we do have a marketplace. And so this is going to be a little bit pertinent today because we've got some stuff for your help, but very importantly, we've got directive cards about vaccines and masks, because wait and see what's going to be in store, and you might want to be forearmed, and we're giving you a chance to be forewarned. So on that note, let's find out what's exciting and in store for us today. And that being the case, I'm going to have Charles jump in here and do the honors and run down introducing Maryann today.
Thank you, Jeff, and welcome, Maryann.
Thank you for having me.
Indeed, this has been an issue that I learned about, back around 2014 or so, when I was helping Governor Gary Johnson run for president. We had a nonprofit that coalesced with various groups in the 50 states. And I kind of went with whatever issue my volunteers wanted to push. And in Pennsylvania and Alaska, and in some ways Indiana, and maybe a couple other states, they were telling me that there's a great issue around the family law system, starting with the Child Protective Service agents that would use this vague negligence standard to wreck families and kidnap kids. and push them over into foster care and how federal funding exacerbates that dynamic. Then the family judges themselves who don't treat the parents equally and really persecute one or both parties for years on end. And then most of us have met someone after a divorce or with a troubled family that's suffered in the system. I have a friend, a high-level government employee who's had her life ruined. Then I had a customer of our health plan that Jeff and I run, who also was caught up in that dynamic. And we actually had a webinar on this topic a year ago with Carrie McDonald, now at Cato, and Michael Ramey at parentalrights.org, talking how maverick behavior, homeschooling or not vaccinating, independent thinking in health and education could trigger a CPS investigation and, sabotage your family. So we're back to the issue with Maryann, and she is an author, Maryann Petri, an author of a book on this topic, how dismantling family court corruption is a critical issue that we all should become aware of. She's a nurse, and she went through the ringer herself personally. So she has some great ideas how to depoliticize the family court system, how to get rid of some of the incentives towards corruption. It's a hard nut to crack. I know in Pennsylvania, John DiLiberto was on the call here. We tried to push an independent commission to oversee the matter. Kara Clifton, Alaska, has some ideas. She's on the call. She's been very involved with this issue. So that's the intro, Jeff. I'm looking forward to this topic.
I would say so. Fantastic. Well, Maryann, the floor is now yours.
Well, thank you for having me. What I can say about family court is that it is, the best way I can describe it is a very twisted three-ring circus. A little bit of background on me was that I'd been a nurse for 22, 23 years, and I had been divorced, and we were co-parenting very well. And I had the great idea to set him up on a date with a distant acquaintance. I was not aware that the distant acquaintance worked in the courthouse. So what happened was that our co-parenting relationship went downhill from there. Once he met her, she moved in 2 weeks later, and 7 months later, they were married. And then I started noticing my children changed towards me, especially my oldest. She was exhibiting just nasty behaviors. I didn't understand. I thought, well, she's trying to mature, trying to grow up. And I was talking to her, trying to understand what was going on, but I really didn't understand at the time what was going on. And that was that they were slowly brainwashing her. And in the meantime, as she got older, she was making more demands. And what had happened was she just up and left my home. And there's reasons why that are in the book. But she left, and I got a call from CPS within 3 hours wanting to come to my home and talk to me. And luckily, my husband was laid off at the time. And this woman came to our house after I had picked up the kids from school, the other ones at least, and she proceeded to scream at me for 2.5 hours. She came through the door and said, "If you're indicated with any emotional abuse charges, you will lose your job as a registered nurse." And I said, wait a minute, no one's getting abused in this house. And my husband was just sitting there watching her scream at me. And then she left. And we didn't know what to think. I didn't know what to think. I had to call work and let them know that I may be indicated. Eventually I was. And when I was suspended from my nursing job because you cannot work with emotional abuse charges, which are the same as physical child abuse charges. You're in the kettle with everybody else, even pedophiles. Okay. So I couldn't work. And my husband from there had to take on other jobs out of the state to pull in the money to make up for my salary. Then what happened from there was my ex-husband immediately called an emergency petition to have my other children removed. And based on the fact that I was mentally unstable, on top of this indication for emotional child abuse. And we were before the president judge, and he recused himself based on the fact that he vaguely knew me, and he shouldn't have done that. And the reason why he shouldn't have done that is he should have put the burden back on to child services and said, why are we here 3 months later? If the children were in danger 3 months ago, why weren't they removed then? Why are we doing this now? But no, he turned us over to a very corrupt family court judge. And who we ended up with was a judge that was in collusion with the opposing attorney. They had had a working relationship within the courthouse for a number of years, and they knew each other quite well. I tried to recuse him. My attorney let me know about this relationship and said, let's try to recuse him. He would not recuse himself. And the case went downhill from there. And what had happened was, as I was fighting the first indication of emotional child abuse, the judge ordered visitation. And of course, the ex would not adhere to it. And we had to call an emergency petition ourselves to get him to follow this order. And the judge just slapped him on the wrist, really. He really didn't do anything with him. And he ordered visitation. That did not happen. We would go to pick up the kids. The lights were on. No one's home. So we had to call in another emergency petition to go in and tell the judge, a different judge, that he's not letting me see the kids. So what happened with there, he ordered 3 times a week between 4 p.m. to 8 p.m. And the ex still did not adhere to that order as well. So I did not see my children for 3 months. Then what happened was finally, it was at the end of August, we got in there, and I was, I hate to back up, I'm sorry. I was exonerated from the first emotional abuse indication. And I called work and I said, hey, I can come back to work. Little did I know, 4 days later, I would be getting a call from another Child Protective Services worker, and she told me right away that I was indicated. And I said, what are the indications? And she said, well, you took away his Xbox and you would not let him ride his bike around the block. And I said, what? I'm going to call my lawyer. And going through that whole summer, not seeing the kids, then finding out from work that by November, we had to have our clearances in. We had to have fingerprints in, state police clearance in, and child abuse clearances in. Well, my hearing for the emotional abuse indication on the second child wasn't until the beginning of December. So I was involuntarily terminated from the hospital I worked at. And there was nothing I could do about it. And again, the judge of the child services exonerated me as well. And that was in January, I found that out. But the hospital would not rehire me because they knew I had another child. And they did not want to go through this again. And none of the other hospitals would hire as well. So what happened was the child support judge got a hold of me and she would not let go. There was always a support contempt conference followed by a support contempt hearing. And this went on and on until the point where she demanded $2,000 or I spend 2 months in prison. And I thought, well, I could get the $2,000 because there was a pension fund that my ex had hid from me. That was also one in Superior Court. He just wouldn't pay it. It just never happened. The ex also had said in the meantime that he had wanted that money put into the arrears. That never happened either. And the reason why that didn't happen was the judge agreed to it. The family court judge agreed to it. He didn't sign off on it, nor did he send it down to domestic relations. So it was in limbo. And I went to a magistrate trying to get this money to pay the judge the purge amount of $2,000. And I just couldn't get the money. And I emailed the ex-husband and I said, hey, this is not going to be good for the kids. Call this off. They're not going to be able to handle their mother going to prison. I would not do this to you. So what happened was we had the support contempt conference on Holy Week, and I was sitting in a box with a bunch of guys, and in walks my ex and his parents and his attorney. And so we're waiting there, and I watched the bailiff go over to the attorney and said, what are you doing here? And he just leaned over and said, we're just here to observe. And I'm thinking to myself, gee, it's being Holy Week. You just want to see me get shackled and hauled off like Jesus. That's what was going through my mind. And the judge pranced out in her flowing black demonic robes, and she called my name first. And I had a hard time getting out of the box because it was tighter than a movie theater. And as I got out, I was touching each man on the shoulder and I was saying, God bless you, God bless you, God bless you. And I hope she heard me. But I got up to her and she then sentenced me to jail. And I turned myself into the sheriff's office. And I only made it there 5 days because they would not give me any of my prescribed medications, which is a human rights violation. Along with family court, I really think family court is a human rights violation into and unto itself. And I was also having chest pain in there as well. And I told the nurse I need to go to the emergency room. And the guard spoke up for her and said, we don't do that here. And I thought to myself, I better not die in here. So I called my father the following night and I said, could you please pay the purge amount? And I told him what to do. And I was out the next day. And as we were driving home, he said, as a 70-year-old, are we going to be doing this every 3 months? And I said, yes, we have to feed him the money he wants. And none of this should have happened to begin with. And in the meantime, I had gone pro se and I filled out paperwork and 7 briefs and 7 reproduced records and sent them on to the Superior Court about my child support case because the judge still would not let up. Well, 5 months later, I had a heart attack and I had 3 stents placed to the LAD. And believe it or not, I had another support contempt hearing in front of Judge Spear. And she was not looking at me, but she handed me a physician verification form, even though I had given her all the cardiologist's notes. Everything that the cardiologist did was not good enough for her. She hands me a physician verification form and says, you go give this to your family physician and you have him fill it out within 7 days. And this is the only thing that's keeping you out of jail today. And I said, sure, and I went right to my doctor's that day. He filled it out because he knew what they were doing to me. And I drove it back in to the courthouse, to her office, and handed it to her receptionist, of course, a copy. And she kind of laid off. And then about a month later, 2 days after Christmas, I'm just lounging on the couch because I was exhausted. And my husband throws me a big piece of mail and he said, look what came from the Superior Court. And I thought, well, I guess we lost again. But it was a Christmas present. It was vacated on remand. And I said to him, we won the child support case. And what happened from there was I hired a Supreme Court attorney out of the city, because after the heart attack, I could not, I just couldn't do it. And she went in there, and of course it was a perfect blizzard. And she went before the judge and she explained everything to the judge. And then she said to Judge Spear, "You have to do what the Superior Court has written." And I was really shocked she said that. And as we were standing there, every time his attorney opened his mouth, he was overruled. And then everything we said was sustained. And I thought, wow, this is a total change in demeanor from how she's treated me. So the judge asked a question and then his attorney answered it. And I went to object and my attorney grabbed my hand. And she went and then she objected and we were again sustained. And then I said to my attorney, I said, his W-2. So my attorney said to the judge, "We really need to look at his W-2. And then she goes, "You two get up here." And she kind of sounds like a chirper. But two attorneys went up there and his attorney says, "We need to see your W-2. And the ex produced his W-2. And no, my attorney was right. None of this should have happened to begin with what he made. I lost my job. I lost everything, went to prison for nothing. With the kind of money that he made, he should be ashamed of himself. Also, while I was in prison, my son had an altercation with him, finding out that his mother was in prison, being teased at school because his mother was in prison. And that was very sad because he did report it to the school counselor and they did mandate report it. But Children's Services said, it's just parents have different parenting styles. Now, think about it. If I had done that, I would have been locked up. And there needs to be a big change in family court. Family court needs to change. My ex has alienated me now from two of my children, my oldest and my middle one. They both hate me. With the lies that he has told them, he has read them judges' court orders. He has even done that with a counselor present. He would go to family counseling sessions and would never tell me when they were. So I was never there, but he was reading them transcripts and court orders, which made my son very anxious. And he had an anxiety issue. He also had stomach ulcers. And what we should do with these judges, because how I was treated in there, I have never been treated so badly by these two judges. They need to be drug tested. I think there should be mandatory drug testing, and these judges should not be serving 20-year terms. They can serve between maybe 4 to 7 years is fine. And I think what should also happen is they should eliminate judicial elections so that judges are accountable to the government and not to other judges or their election sponsors who are also their friends. That simple thing can cut corruption in half at least. At least do that. Another not so costly solution is to designate judges at least 2 counties away from their past tenure residence. And that would also help maybe not so much coziness in that courtroom and in their chambers. And like I said, anywhere between 4 to 7 years is fine, and no more than 2 terms in a county, because they need to be held accountable. We also need video cameras and tamper-proof mics in those courtrooms, because when you need to report a judge for his bad behavior, it would be good to be able to say, "We were here on this date, please pull the films." And these judges need to be held accountable for what they're doing to these parents and these children. And in my opinion, they are further enhancing parental alienation between the target parent and the child. And the opposing attorney is also doing it as well. He's thoroughly enjoying it, at least in my case, he was. And also what has taken place is that these children have taken on the behaviors of the parent that they are now being told to live with. And that parent is turning their whole worlds upside down. My kids can't remember holidays that I've had with them, birthday parties, Halloween parties. It's like their memories have been washed away of me. And I gave them very wonderful parties and, things, and took my oldest shopping, and we all had a good time, and they don't remember. They don't remember. And that's what's happening. And suddenly also the middle one was demanding of me that I just buy him a car. He had become suddenly entitled. And I believe the court enhanced that as well, that behavior, because of having to live with their father, who is telling them God knows what lies about me, did not help. And I had to stop his verbal abusing me. Here and there, he'd call me up and let me have it as to why I wouldn't give him $2,500. I said, I don't have a job anymore. I've had a heart attack. I'm now on Social Security disability. There's nothing I can do. And that still didn't satisfy him. He's just not talking to me at all now. And these judges have got to be educated on parental alienation, whether they like it or not. It's there. And they need to know when people are lying. They need to know when certain attorneys are lying. And they have got to stay out of the same watering hole as all the attorneys go to after work. They're socializing too much, and they're already setting up cases before they even go in there. And that's about all I have to say about that.
To say that's pretty sobering, to be sure. The question I would ask of you before we start getting everyone to raise their hand and ask some other questions is, with the judges that are sitting there, like you said, to limit the amount of time that they're on the scene, are the people that come to present the cases, the caseworkers or whatever, is that kind of the same person all the time too?
These caseworkers, some of them have been there, maybe we'll say 14 years. I don't know what they do with these caseworkers that really don't even know what they're even talking about.
Well, I'm just curious if they have like a relationship with the judge because they've been chummy for such a long time, and it's like, oh, here you are again. Hello there, Mary. How are you doing?
Exactly. Right.
Who are we churning on the mill today?
Right. And along with that, my ex's wife, I think I had said, worked in the courthouse as well.
Here's a little side question, then I see some hands up. I love the fact that you made this comment, and I don't know if everybody kind of zipped right by, but you said we need to have tamper-proof microphones. Yes. Why would you so specifically say tamper-proof? Everyone just assumes if there's a mic, it's recording what's happening. Why did you have to add that added part to it that it has to be tamper-proof? What's happening? Or something you've experienced that makes you want to say that?
Well, I was talking to a parent who said that everyone was being recorded, but they noticed that there would be a dead silence in the film. Like the judge would be talking, but there would be silence. Who was pressing a button to silence that? So why not remove that button? Are
you able to bring your own recording device to the event so that you can make your own separate?
No, not in the courthouse. They make you leave your cell phones in the car.
So there you go. There's an interesting point. Charles, I see your hand is up.
Thanks, Jeff, and fantastic story, Maryann. Very sorry that you had to go through that.
It's horrible.
It sounds similar to my friend's experience, and I imagine that's almost the rule versus the exception in many cases with the family courts. I would like to invite some of my past colleagues in politics who pushed some reforms around this area in Alaska and Pennsylvania. John DiLiberto and Kara Clifton are on the call. If they could unmute themselves and kind of talk about what they did and maybe get Maryann's response to what they did. Kara? Can you unmute yourself? Or John DiLiberto for Pennsylvania?
I'm unmuted.
All right, Kara, go ahead.
Well, I feel that on the national level, there is a great discrepancy between what we see in family courts in our state versus what you're seeing in family courts in your state. I think it's set up a lot differently. And there's a group here that's been trying to remove judges because our judges, we just had an election, and they were on the ballot. Our judges are appointed by the governor during his term, and then after, I believe it's 5 years, or I'm not really sure about the time right now, but they go before the public on a yes or no ballot. They have to put out their campaign information just like a candidate, and that's a yes or no, up or down vote on our judges. And so there's a group here in Alaska that's been going through and trying to show that some of these judges should be removed from the bench. But the problem is, as I see it, we have something called the Judicial Council, which is composed of court employees and sometimes jury participants that vote on whether the judge has met some criterias. And these people who are actually court employees, in many cases state employees, are always saying that these judges are great. They're always getting, fours out of, threes and fours out of 5 points on everything. So it looks like all the judges are doing a fine job. And then we have these this opposite thing, the people of the public that vote no on every judge, which means that, I've been in the courtroom where the judges said, well, they always vote no on us anyway, so does it really matter what I do in the courtroom? And I find that this is not a very good system, in the fact that the public doesn't have any input. They never interview the defendants. And a defendant gets into the court just like you did, and everybody in that courtroom is getting money from the state in some way or another, except for the defendant, who may or may not be on some kind of welfare program. But it doesn't matter, because when your children are taken away, you're presumed to be guilty until you're found innocent, and nobody is defending you. There's no way to prove your innocence. And this is just backwards. So my platform, when I have run for office, and what I'm pursuing, is, I just call it due process in family court. And I think we need to have the same guidelines that are in the federal Constitution about due process for criminal activities. We also have to have that apply to family court. Every parent is innocent until proven guilty. And like you pointed out, they didn't take your children away. Your younger children were not taken away when the allegations were made against you. And then 3 months later, they come out and say, hey, we're going to take away your younger children now because of these allegations 3 months ago. They weren't in any danger 3 months ago. Why they are in danger now? Plus, how can you prove your innocence? Once they take your children away, you have no way of proving your innocence. And so there's just so many things wrong with the court system, but it isn't uniform across all states. Every state has to handle this in their state legislatures by having more ways for due process to be found. And we need to put it in possibly into the state constitutions, some guidelines and some help for all of these parents. And I work with the Fathers' Rights Group, and I work with individual parents who are targeted by OCS. And certain judges are favorable to women, and certain judges are favorable to men. It's crazy. But what I can tell you is, I heard this judge say and I've heard other judges, more than one judge say, you were not, they're talking to the OCS people, and we call it OCS here in Alaska. And they're talking to the CPS people, and they say, you haven't given me any reason to terminate parental rights. Come up with some reasons that I should terminate the parental rights in this case. And I'm thinking, here's a court-appointed attorney, and they're not defending this person at all. And they're not trying to prove innocence. And they're asking for more information to prove guilt. And it should be the other way around. Every single judge should be asking for the opposite. So I just saw a chat here. If parental rights can be terminated, they're not rights. Parental rights need to be embedded in the Constitution of every single state. So that's where I am on that. And I'll turn it back over to everybody else.
What do you think about those reform ideas, Maryann? Better due process with you're innocent until proven guilty. Stopping this Orwellian pressure from judges on CPS workers to find termination reasons.
What's to do? You're muted.
What could happen? Well, what started back in 1962 when Congress instituted the family court just out of nowhere. So I'm thinking before that, things were handled in a civil manner in a civil court. Correct me if I'm wrong. I could be wrong. But when Congress did that, they made a huge mistake. And I guess you could handle that one of two ways. You could repeal it, but they're making too much money off of it, off of the Title 4D. I don't think Congress is going to repeal family court or Title 4D for that matter, which is very sad. As far as the due process, it depends on your judge. Like with my case, there was a lot of collusion and bias, and the judge and the opposing attorney were BFFs for a long time. And it didn't matter. If I would have walked in there with a Hollywood team of attorneys, I still would have lost based on that. Actually, my kids lost. That's what they lost out on, knowing their mother. And their stepmother should not have been in the courtroom at all. She should have been at her desk doing whatever she does. And what needs to be done, and I saw in the film Erasing Family, was the Sweden model. And when there's a divorce, you sit down with your ex and you write out, well, I'll do this and I'll be here on these days. I'll take care of this. I'll pay for that. You pay for this. And you share, what the child needs. And that way you stay out of the courtroom. The only way to solve this is to stay away from there. And people need to look at that film and look at that Sweden model, because Sweden was saying, well, there is litigation, but not as much as what goes on in other countries. As well as my ex and I, we were actually doing the Sweden model. We were co-parenting very well until that third party entered the picture. And that disrupted a lot of things. And I think if you're going to follow the Sweden model and you meet a boyfriend or a girlfriend and they start chirping in your ear, you have to shut them down and say, look, this is working between he and I. This is working between her and I. Stay out of it. We're just going to keep it going as it is. And I think that's the best way, is to mediate and stay out of that courtroom, because you're bound to lose in more ways than one and treated horribly, and you're guilty until proven innocent.
The one thing it seems in any of these types of court scenarios, never seems like there's an equitable outcome. One side benefits dramatically and the other side is penalized. Like you said, either it's favorable to the wife or favorable to the husband, but it's never equitable to both.
No, not at all. There's just so much suffering in family court. And then what people don't realize is you have a family court judge, and then you also have a different judge for child support. Even though the family court judge that I had, it's in the book, he was running it like a 3-ring circus. I think, in my opinion, he should have been drug tested. But anyway, the child support judge really came after me as if she had a vendetta. And it was just very eerie and kind of creepy.
It seems like they have a perverse pleasure. It's like the person that decides to be in the military sort of has that mindset, and the person that decides to be that kind of judge wants to sit in that type of a position. So that's a little scary right there.
Jeff?
Yes, go ahead, Charles. You have your hand up again?
I did. Thank you. Maryann, what do you think about this thing I mentioned earlier that I think Hillary Clinton got enacted? And that's a federal bonus for child protective service, what do you call it, foster placement. A lot of folks in this field of family law corruption are saying that's got to go, that it's incenting that dynamic you mentioned with the judges saying, hey, get me a better reason to terminate. Is it to place more kids with foster care? How does that fit into here? And then I'd like to invite Christine Smith to unmute herself and kind of comment on your talk as well and maybe add some thoughts. Go ahead, Maryann.
Okay, right. I think feeding these incentives, that was very wrong of Clinton to do. They have disrupted people's lives with their 1997 AFSA. It's just been a big mess, and people are paying dearly for the Title 4D. People are committing suicide over the Title 4D because they cannot make these payments. What the judges do is they deliberately inflate child support orders so they can get more Title 4D out of this person who can't and will not ever be able to afford to pay that child support. And then what happened with me also as well was between the family court and the child support, and I had developed post-traumatic stress disorder. And from there, my counselor decided to take my nursing license away because she said, you can't concentrate. My concentration was off. I was so upset. They take your kids away from you. They've got you labeled guilty. Your reputation is shot. Even though I was exonerated by a child services judge on the 2 emotional abuse charges, the family court judge still said I was emotionally abusing the kids. He could care less.
And Chrissy?
Yes, I would like to say I've had 7 divorce attorneys. I was falsely accused of mental illness when I asked for a divorce 2 weeks after. And even though my doctors say, you know, I have ADHD and I don't need any medication, they keep spewing these lies. And my oldest son is 18 now, and I've reunited with him over the past couple of months because he's at college. He wrote something about my husband perjuring himself, part of it. And I went back to court 3 weeks ago in front of a judge. I was asking for my 18-year-old to be a supervised visitor, asking for my children's medical records, showing this perjury, had an affidavit, had this amazing hour with this judge, felt so listened to. 2 days later, I get the response that I now have a gag order on all social media. And my children 15 to 16 now have to provide their own transportation to see me. My 15-year-old daughter has to provide her own transportation. And I still have, you know, it's just, I have no rights. Anyway, but I did have a meeting yesterday with the I've been doing all these complaints on my divorce attorneys and the psychiatrists and the children's therapists, and they're being processed by the state of Pennsylvania. And I had a second interview yesterday with the investigator, but they're investigating the doctors and the therapists. But all the attorneys I sent in, they keep sending stuff like the attorneys are starting to lie to cover themselves up. But with the investigators and the attorneys, they don't care. They're working on the attorney side. It's never going to go anywhere. Anyway, that's my situation.
And Chrissy, what reforms do you propose, or what do you think of Maryann's reform ideas?
Well, here's the thing. What happened in Kentucky was when they did shared parenting, they found that the domestic violence really dropped. And the domestic violence lady here, she just hit me up trying to get me to sell CBD oil. And I told her my situation. She's like, but that's not domestic violence. But this parental alienation causes domestic violence. And I think 50-50 shared. I think taking the money off of the kids' heads, because if you look, the University of California did a study on the child support, and some of these child supports are 300 to 400% too much. And putting that money on a kid's head, and the kids, my daughter knows how much money I spend to try to get her back. I mean, it's just so just completely perverse.
I know from having had to hire people at businesses I've functioned in the past, their child support needs are so high. They're trying to figure out if they can make enough money to even have anything left over after the check is cut at the end of the week for themselves.
If you watch the Erasing Family movie, it really goes into it. One guy shows his paycheck for a zero. He got nothing 1 month. You know, they'll take it all.
And it's hard to imagine, because as a judge, knowing that's going to happen to that person, how can you even make such a thing a reality?
They'll take all of veterans' money too. They'll take a veteran's complete, yeah.
Is there like a national clearinghouse or anywhere where this is like, I know like we were shown before, Maryann, your website and stuff, but is there any sort of a national organization trying to spearhead on this?
The Erasing Family movie with Ginger, she moved on to the National Parenting Organization, and they have 10 full-time people, and they have a report card on all the states, and they have all the states ranked on 22 points of where they stand with, you know, how we want this legislatively to move forward. So I would go, and they're on LinkedIn very strong too.
What's the name of it?
NPO, National Parents Organization.
Okay, that's good to know. Any other questions we've got? All right, well, we're running out of time anyway, so that's unfortunately it's a huge topic, obviously, and look at how ridiculous this whole thing is. It's terrible. And you know, and the sad reality is, you know, you're describing what's bad for you, Maryann, which it is. But really, on a national basis, who's the real victim? These kids. What kind of parents are they going to become? What kind of adults are they going to become? What kind of participants in society? Some will be okay, but others, who knows? They could become abusers and whatever themselves as a consequence of all of this.
Right, because they're learning from the abuser.
Yeah. And it seems like it's okay. The judge, everyone's approving all this activity. They're giving tacit approval. It's a very scary thought.
It is.
So Maryann, I really appreciate you being so courageous to get out there and expose yourself, because a lot of people would be embarrassed to explain all of what happened to them. But it's critical, because plenty of others, I'm sure you probably have a lot of people say, oh, thank you so much for saying this, because this is what happened to me too. But I was too afraid to come out and tell others.
They try to shame you into silence completely. Especially
bet.
me with my mental illness. They keep saying she's crazy, she's crazy. I'm like, I'm a biology major. There's nothing wrong with me. Quit labeling me. Yeah.
Yeah, but the problem is that if I label you, then that's going to precede you even showing up at my door. I can look you up online or whatever happens today, and I'm just going to make that assumption before you even show up.
Right.
So you're kind of in trouble to begin with.
Chrissy
and I do meet people. Oh, go ahead, Maryann.
Oh, I'm sorry, Chrissy. You and I had a kind of some dynamic that was similar in both our cases. We were both being called mentally unstable, and it's not right. You just don't point a finger at someone and say you're mentally unstable.
Well, it's used as a weapon. It's not used to help us. It's not like you're mentally unstable. Can we help you? It's weaponized psychology. And I will say, like, a lot of these, I'm on these groups, and the parents fighting over it, the kids do wind up in foster care. You know, because they'll all of a sudden both parents will lose the kids into foster care, because they'll start making accusations against each other, and they both lose them. I see it a lot on my groups. And that's why I never fought my husband, because my husband was leaving the kids and doing neglect and things, but I was not going to go to CPS, because then my kids would wind up in foster care.
And you know, the sad reality is what you're describing. I got to imagine that's the card they like to play, because in politics, everyone's been playing the race card. But when it comes to this family thing, claiming the other person's crazy has got to be the go-to excuse. Kara, I see you've got your hand up. Let's squeeze in one last question here or comment. You have to unmute yourself.
Okay, how's this?
There you go.
Am I? All right, yeah, we have a shared parenting bill that's in our legislature now. And hasn't been going anywhere. It's been stuck in committee, but hopefully it will be going somewhere this year. And I think the 50-50 parenting, this is also sponsored by the Fathers' Rights Movement. I think the 50-50 parenting might solve some of these problems because it will keep, you know, with 50-50 parenting, the child support is this, you know, is evened out, and the custody is evened out. And again, like the Sweden model where you're saying, well, you pay for this and I pay for this, I think you can work it out better. The problem which has been described is where there's a third party and they don't want their spouse or to be paying any child support. I don't understand how a judge can ask for someone to pay child support when the government has caused that person to lose their job. I think that is insane.
Mhm.
And I don't understand what the lawyers are doing if they can't present that kind of evidence to the judge that there is no child support to be paid here. And I just wanted to make my feelings known. And when they're talking about termination, they're not talking about foster care. They want to adopt your children away from you. They want a permanent termination, so you will never see your children again. And I call that cruel and unusual punishment for a parent over allegations that are made anonymously. So I'll be quiet now.
That's diabolical, Karen. I
Mhm.
cannot believe you just said that. It's scary.
It is, but it's so true though. And it is diabolical.
Are you aware of Connie Reguli in Tennessee? She's an attorney that's been fighting this amazing. I don't know if Connie, she's all into the foster care stuff.
I've
Anyway.
been following her.
Okay.
Very good. Well, you know what? Unfortunately, we are totally at the end of our wire here on the timetable. So I really appreciate you being here today. This was really important. And as I indicated, you know, we had that continuing the conversation. So this is one that's really worth following up on. And again, here are these links as these videos will become available. So we encourage you to come to these. And if you haven't experienced any of the other stuff that we're doing, please come over there too. And Maryann, I want to definitely tell you thanks for being here today.
Thank you again for having me. I appreciate it.
And